What's up? I'm gonna break down lipstick on a champagne flute today. It has been a minute since I've opened this project. Well, I opened it earlier today, but so I know it works. But I think there's a couple things that were broken, but for the most part it works. Yeah, we're gonna roll with headphones. All right. Check this bad boy out. Make sure you guys can hear me or hear the project. Looks like you should be able to. Yeah, we're on 28. Shit. Welcome to the stream. Welcome. Just getting stuff set up. All right, let's see. I think everyone should be able to hear this. Hold on, I have the vocal muted.
These empty rooms, those wasted days, they've been carried off on the winds of change. My dusty suits, my broken ways are shrinking in the rearview. Hallelujah, babe.
All right, let me know if there's any audio issues. I think everyone should be able to hear that fine. This is not like the final mastered version. I did that in a separate project, but this is pretty close. I've got a limiter and some stuff on the master channel just to give it like enough juice to be loud enough, but it's not like the full, mastered version that I sent off to Spotify. But it's close enough. And I'm not gonna do I think for today's breakdown, I'm gonna focus more on the production. Because the mix and the master in particular with this song, I do things quite differently now, and I actually am not very happy with how the mix and master turned out for this one. So I'm not really going to focus on those elements. I'm going to focus more on just the production and how things were laid out and kind of the mentality behind why I did certain things, and also some of the sound design and stuff like that. All right. So this one's it's not as big as it looks. It's 112 tracks, but not all of it's really being used. I think, yeah. Some of these string elements aren't even being used, right? Actually, we're gonna hide those. What else we got? Yeah, we'll hide that. Hide that. Wait, hold on. Yeah, okay. And these are the stems from the original song, but I only ended up, as I do with most of my remixes, pretty much 99% of them, I only ended up using the lead, or the vocal really. And there's this little vocal flute effects thing. I don't know. It's really subtle. I think I included that in there as well. So yeah, normally with my remixes, I'll take the vocal and I just basically write my version of the song around it. So let's go ahead and I guess we'll just jump right into it. Let's check out the intro.
These empty rooms, those wasted days, they've been carried off on the winds of change. My dusty suits, my broken ways, are shrinking in the rearview. Hallelujah, babe. All of those nights have been stumbling, running in place, hustling, struggling, coming in late. Something is happening, twisting my faith. There's a shadow in my bedroom.
All right, so there is one element in here that's either wasn't included in the final version or is a different sound design. I can't remember, but it's this guy. Where is it? I think it's this right here. I don't know where this came from. No, it's not that. There's like a little saw thing that sits on top. Maybe it's this right here. Yeah, it's that. So I don't know why it's like buzzy that way, because I don't remember it sounding like that in the final version. It's probably more like that. But I don't know. We'll just leave it as is. I don't remember it sounding exactly this way, but it should be mostly the same. All right, so the vocals are doing their thing. I didn't do much processing of the vocals, I don't think. There's a couple stuff going on just to tighten everything up, because the original is like an R&B tune, so everything's kind of like the vocals are a lot less processed. They're more dynamic and stuff like that, and to get the vocal to sit right in a more EDM sounding song, you have to kind of squash it a bit more, which is what I did. We look at this.
Empty rooms,
We're gonna take all this off.
those wasted days.
So I mean, obviously there's like a volume difference, but essentially I'm just squeezing the vocal. I put a 2A on it, and sick. All right, forgot I can hear the subscribe stuff now. Thank you for the subscription. Sorry I missed your name. David, thanks for the sub, buddy. Dope to have you with us. So yeah, got the 2A on there, RVox, just to kind of tighten everything up even a bit more.
These empty rooms,
The low mids, especially in EDM vocals, or a vocal in an EDM track, low mids tend to get kind of busy, so I like to cut that out of the vocal just because it leaves room for the instrumental to shine a bit more, especially for remixes. So that's kind of what I'm doing here, a little bit of low mid control.
wasted days, they've been carried off.
So just that, and then yeah, and then a little bit of, I think this is like a reverb throw, that's why I have that on there. Just automate the dry wet. So
These empty rooms,
that's pretty much it for the vocal for the whole track. Like, I'm not doing anything else with the vocal. There's very limited stuff. The only other thing I'm doing is I do a vocoder, which I'll show that, and then I'll just get into like the rest of the instrumental. But the vocoder, I've just got it. This is the processed vocal, so unprocessed, you can see the waveforms a lot more dynamic and stuff like that. Processed got a lot more squashed. Bounce that out to audio and then run it into the vocoder, which is this guy right here.
these empty rooms, those wasted days, they've been carried off.
What's up, David? Welcome. But yeah, so for the vocoder, I'm just doing, I like manipulator. There's a couple different stuff you can use though. Like there's Razor, NI Razor does pretty good for like more digital, like really digital sounding stuff. I like manipulator just because it's almost like if you were to take little altar boy and turn it into a vocoder. That's kind of what it sounds like, if that makes sense. But it's just really good for like single voice things. So I think with his vocal there was already a little bit of effects and stuff in the background, so there's a couple of artifacts here and there, but for the most part it sounds pretty good. And then for this, I think in the intro there's actually no chord, well there are chords, but it's all being played by the vocoder.
Empty rooms, those wasted
If I
days.
take out the vocal, because again, there's not really anything special going on there.
These empty rooms, those wasted days, they've been carried off on the wings of change.
And these are the chords I'm playing. But yeah, as I said, chord progression in the beginning is voiced primarily or only through that that vocoder. I don't have any other like pads or anything. I don't think any of that comes in until bar 17. But these chords, we got a G sharp minor, which these aren't like perfect. I don't, Logic does a decent job of guessing what the chord name is, but B add 9, E sus2, and F sharp at 11. But basically just extended chords to give it a little bit more of a jazzy feel. Kind of puts it more in the future bass territory, which was what I was going for with this song. Yeah. Oh, what's up, Serenade? Yeah, no, the vocoder, I feel like I didn't want it to stick out too much. I just kind of wanted it to be this extra layer, to just help thicken up everything and made it more harmonically dense. So I wasn't like, the way I mixed it was pretty low key. Although, like I said, I said this earlier, but the mix on this song I'm not a big fan of. I would definitely do it differently if I did it over. But so I'm gonna focus more on production for this breakdown. But yeah, so we got that.
These empty rooms,
Oh crap.
today,
And then you've just got
been carried off.
this little bell that plays over top, and it's just kind of like almost like a counter melody that's just playing against the chords. That bell is something from M1. I still use M1 quite a bit, but for bell sounds I typically use Keyscape now. But yeah, this is just something I found in M1. They have some pretty good bell and mallet sounds. I normally just go to this little section here to find them. So that's that bell sound. And then to keep things kind of moving, because I had this little pluck, try to take that out.
Empty rooms, those wasted days, they've been carried
So it's really subtle, but it kind of gives a little bit of like movement to the mids. And it gives it basically some static kind of rhythmic movement that the vocals can play off of. And so the vocals just aren't floating and the listener's trying to guess where the downbeat is and all that kind of stuff. This pluck kind of helps give that context without there having to be percussion, and still feels floaty, if that makes sense. That's the whole point of that.
those wasted days, they've been carried off.
This is just some ESW pack, which is Echo Soundworks. I have a bunch of his packs, just really good serum presets. Probably very little change to the patch itself, but so just running that.
Carried off on the wings of change. My dusty suits, my broken ways, I'm shrinking in the review hat.
All right, so we got a couple other things that are going on here. This stuff is also playing in the intro. Same idea as this pluck up here. It's just kind of more, it's probably playing, the root note, and then what is this? Oh, it's actually a vocal sample. Okay. So that's actually just the vocal that I got, the vocal stem, and I just threw it into this sampler and then just picked out, I think I did it like cut by transient and then just kind of started playing around with the pitches and stuff, or the notes. So that's what's going on there. Hold on one second. I'm gonna turn the fan on me. Yeah, ESW, like, love Echo Soundworks. Great stuff. But yeah, like I said, these guys are doing functionally the same thing as this pluck I was talking about before, just giving some context to the rhythm. This is very subtle, it filters in. And it's just more vocal samples that are just playing around. Just kind of like little ear candy here and there. And then
Dusty suits,
Got a little bit crushed. What, sine wave? Yeah, kind of like a sine wave. Oh, and then it drops into the Reese, but so it's like a sine sol combo. And then I'm pretty sure I'm running it through a bit crusher or downsampler. There you go. And that's just to give it that dirtier sound. So that downsampled bit crush sound works really well when you have an otherwise very clean instrumental, which is basically what this whole intro is, right? The vocoder is pretty low pass and it's tucked in the back. So the only thing you have playing around is you have these plucks, which are also pretty low passed, and then the vocal, which is, you know, doesn't have a ton of highs in it. So throwing in this bit crush bass sound that comes in really catches your ear because it's got that crunchy top end that just kind of shines through since nothing else is really playing in that register. So that was the idea behind having that be a little bit crushed, because I could do the same thing but then just take out the downsample, right? But it doesn't have the same effect, right? It just gives it a really nice texture. But if you already have a pretty busy instrumental, that effect loses its impact. So this is something to keep in mind, is like contrast between the different tones you already have in your instrumental and things that you plan on adding in. Also helps to give it its own little space and stuff like that. So chords, we've got a little supporting thing here. And this sounds like some kind of string layer. Yeah. It's another, I think this project is like primarily Echo Soundworks patches, to be honest. It's a lot of them, I know that. So one of the string things. Pretty sure it's playing the same thing as the bass melody. Yeah. So it's just giving that upper mid register some presence there. And then everything kind of starts to open up here for the chords. So you got these little like supporting chords that I start coming in. These are like the sol waves just on like a 8th note staccato type thing. Just a little LFO bouncing around. And then as for the vocoder, it's doing the same chords, but now it's brought in that top melody, that little counter melody. It's brought it in there as well. So hard to go back. Where the hell is it? There it is. So now you got that little top melody. So you can hear it. I think you can hear it kind of playing around there against the chords. And it just has a little reverb washout. But yeah, so that just kind of ties all of the components together at the end, the last kind of 8 bars of the intro before we move into the pre/hook, whatever you want to call it. That's what's going on there. And if I were to do this again today, I'd probably arrange this a little differently. I think having all these layers some of them kind of step on each other's toes, but I mean it works for the style I was going for. So yeah, let me go back. Oh, that's right, we actually have some drums that come in here. Oh, that is unfortunate. So I'm gonna have to restart the project. We'll be right back. This is one of the reasons I've switched over to Ableton. Logic has been having some funky issues with the way I don't know, like some projects will literally just stop playing. Like 30 minutes into working on the project, it just won't play. So I have no idea why it's doing it. And it only does it in Logic. It doesn't do it in Ableton, which is really weird. Not sure. But I think this project loads relatively quickly. Yeah, so Serenade, you're right. Future bass typically does have a lot of layers, and it's not like if I was doing it, I guess what I'm trying to say is that if I was going to come back to this, I probably wouldn't do that future bass type of style. Like, I don't know. I think I'm much more inclined, at least now, to try and make something sound as thick and as open and big as possible with as few layers as I possibly can. Just because, I don't know, it's just the more layers you add, the more difficult the EQing becomes, and mixing and getting everything to glue together becomes more difficult. And then you're also eating up more headroom, and it just gets harder to make everything louder, and it just becomes a huge hassle later down the road. And also inevitably will sound kind of muddier or cloudier, and it just doesn't sound as sharp basically. And I think what I've learned is, like, as my taste has refined and as my mixing style and my ear has gotten better, that if I can get something done with fewer layers and fewer synths, that's definitely the way to go. I still will stack, like, you know, if a saw stack needs it, then I'll do like 4 or 5 saws, but for the most part, I don't see myself doing that, or I just don't do that anymore. Like, even some of my biggest sounds or biggest tunes that I've done recently, like the past, you know, well, for instance, the Remember remix, like the main drop lead on that sounds absolutely massive, but it's like 2 layers, I think, and it's really just 1 layer with a very like slight supporting layer. But it's just the processing was very specific. I spent a lot of time on getting the processing just right. So yeah, let's jump back into it. So yeah, I just have the vocal muted right now because I mentioned it earlier, but there's not really anything special with the vocal. Like, it's pretty much just the acapella. I did a little bit of compression and that's it. Like, I didn't do anything else to the vocal. It's already really good as it is. So I just focused on the production I did around that. Then we drop into the kind of hook. Ignore my little tags up here. They're not right. So one of my, I don't want to call it a trick, but I would say like quality or markers of my sound, maybe you could say, but it's something that I started primarily with this remix, maybe even the song I did before this one, which was Count on You, and was switching the chord progression up when it moves into the chorus, build, whatever you want to call it, right? That's, I think switching the chord progression up, obviously it's more work because you got to find a new chord progression that also not only works with the same vocal, but kind of pairs with the other chord progression as well, so it feels natural switching into it. But I think if you're able to pull it off, it feels so much more epic, and it feels like moving into that build section, something big is starting to happen, right? So if you listen to the last chord here, so a couple things happen. One, the chord progression, actually, the tempo doubles essentially on the chord progression. So instead of these long held out kind of 2-bar chords, now we're going into well, it's not quite a bar, but about a bar per chord. And the other thing is in the last chord of the progression, kind of the trick that I always use was to use a very strong like sus chord or an add chord or something like that. Something super extended with a ton of dissonance leads into the first chord of a new progression usually pretty well, because it's kind of like building a ton of tension, and then you resolve all that tension on the first chord of the next progression. So that's kind of the idea behind that. And Antelope, welcome Welcome, dude. Yeah, so I think I did. I'm pretty sure I broke down Need You on the NCS video. I can link that. Let me link that real quick, actually, while it's on my mind. I'm fairly sure I did do. I can't remember if it was Need You or. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Need You. Looks like it. So, I don't know if the link's gonna work, but if you follow that, oh yeah, it looks like it's gonna work. Follow that guy. That is the breakdown I did for Need You on the NCS channel. It's a lot. It's more edited, so it's not me just stumbling over my words for however long this is gonna go on. So it's a little bit easier to watch and all that. So feel free to check that out. And if you have any questions, feel free to come back and ask me some questions as well. I'd be happy to answer. So chords. Introduce this new patch. This is something from. I used to use this a lot. This is actually a plugin from what's it called? Pro Tools. And this is just really nice kind of saw polysynth stack that I used to use quite a bit. What's that sound? Bring that in. Still had the vocoder doing its thing, but I'm playing right now. Okay, the main thing for this song, I think that people get really like, that people really like, is this little lead sound. The melody itself is pretty weird, honestly. I remember struggling for quite a long time on like what to do for the melody for this song, or for the lead melody. And so the patch itself is pretty simple. I think it's a cymatics thing, and then it's got like some LFO that's just pushing it on an eighth note, or I guess a quarter note. Doesn't feel like a quarter note though. I guess it is a quarter. Oh no, yeah, it's a quarter note. Yeah, because we're at 180. So that's just kind of giving it the driving feeling. But the melody itself, I honestly normally am pretty kind of calculated with my melodies, but this was just, I played around for so long until finally I just found something I liked. And I think what made it interesting was kind of was this rising arp feel, but then kind of jumping back and forth between the octaves like I do later on, like right here. Kind of jumping like that. And that's just a build element there. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I normally will play the lead based on like the chord voicings and the notes that are actually in the chords, but this, I just kind of, like I said, messed around until I found something I liked. Oh man, this is gonna be tough. We have to come right back. This is insane. It quit on me again. Hopefully, maybe I'll change the buffer rate. That might help. Doesn't usually, but maybe it'll help this time. No, I don't want to activate it. Thank you. I'm excited to be done with these Logic, like the project breakdowns that I've done in Logic, because at Ableton it runs so much smoother. I'm always hesitant to jump into these Logic projects. It's so frustrating. But we'll make it. We'll make it through. We got this. Right. Let's try real quick. Let's just bump up the buffer. Maybe that will help. Mm-hmm. Ooh. Looks like my... Okay. All right. So, as I was saying, got the build. Build's pretty standard. Drums kind of do what they're supposed to do. It's like the little doubling and all that kind of stuff. So, kit kind of doing its... So, the chord, so the melody of the drop is basically call and response, which I used to do this a ton, and I still do it here and there. But call and response between vocal chops that are made out of the actual vocal. Yeah, just literally drop the vocal in here. Normally, the way I used to make my vocal chops, still do it sometimes like this, but just kind of let it. In Logic, you can drop it into a sampler. I think you can do the same in Ableton and chop it by transients. So it just basically the algorithm kind of picks where it thinks the best points to make the samples are, and then you just play. I would just play around on the keyboard until something sounds cool. So it's a little bit more organic way of coming up with vocal chops instead of just like chopping up a region until something sounds nice. So you've got that, and then it's kind of like the call, I guess, the vocal thing is. And then this part is really just made out of, like, if I remember correctly, doesn't look like it, but it's just the same. It's a section of the melody from the build that is just... Yeah, I just kind of picked like some cool sounding section and just went from there. I don't really have an explanation for it. It was just kind of like, okay, that's cool. And yeah. In terms of the sound design, obviously got quite a few layers here. First layer is this guy. It's fine. Some ESW patch in the gray pack, it looks like. I may have done the filter modulation thing myself just to give it a little bit more of that like pluck feel, but I'm not sure. So that's there. And then processing on that, again, I won't go too much into the actual processing just because I'd probably do it differently now. But you just got a little bit of reverb, a little bit of some EQ, and then as you've seen, probably if you guys have seen my other videos, I use this guy a lot in my Logic projects. So that's going on. The second layer, cool little like panning, little bit crushed panning back and forth thing. So it looks like it's the same patch actually. It is, and then I just did some different processing on it. Basically, got a little. Definitely sounds like it has a bit crusher on it, but it doesn't look like it has a bit crusher on it. Ah, interesting. Oh wait, no, there it is. I was on the thing. There you go. There's a down sampler. So that's that patch, and then you throw in the. That's more of the response, but the last layer is this guy. And it's just kind of a cleaner saw, squarish, almost pluck. And yeah, again from the gray pack. So yeah, nothing crazy there. It's actually triangle pluck, it looks like. And then this actually layers in with the response sound. And this sounds like it's pretty similar to the build lead, which I think it is. Kind of. yeah, so the mentality behind these patches, especially at this stage, now I'm a lot more methodical about how I make this stuff, and about how I layer and what tonalities I use. But back then when I first made this song, it was just kind of a lot of experimentation. I would just preset browse until I found something that I think sounded cool, and then basically try to find something complementary to that. I think now my ear is a lot more developed and I know what to look for a bit more, if that makes sense. And I tend to use a lot of the same sounds now, but then I'll we'll render them to audio and then do other things that way. Whereas at this point, I was just kind of stacking on, you know, serum patch after serum patch until it just sounded thick and full, and kind of going from there. And then drums are pretty basic. Not doing much. Got a little reverse thing there. And then it's kind of like bounces back and forth between not having the hats and then having the hats in like the response section, which is kind of giving it a little bit more groove in the response section. The only other really crazy thing I think going on in the drop is we've got like a bunch of different little synth fills. This is one of the first, maybe not one of the first songs, but definitely one of the songs that helped me kind of solidify the style that I have now, which is like throwing in a lot of those synth distorted growls and fills and stuff like that. This was a song where I really was experimental with that, and I've kind of kept that style ever since the song. So pretty cool to see that here. And then yeah, the little vocal chop. And then these are actually I made myself in some other projects. So what I'll do, and I'll probably do a video on this at some point, but basically normally I do it on Sundays. I try to like schedule a block of time, usually an hour or 2 hours on Sunday, and I just open up a blank project and I just make wonky bass sounds. It's like basically try to break serum and then see what happens, or throw in some crazy Foley samples or some random atmospheric samples or something like that, and then just distort the hell out of them. And you get these kind of crazy bass distorted growls and sound, like stuff like that. And that's still how I make a lot of my synth fills, is exactly like that. Sometimes I'll preset browse, so I'll go through like a cymatics pack, because their bass presets are like over the top for some of their stuff. Like the animal, there's a cymatics animals pack for serum, and a lot of the sounds are just unusable, I think, in normal bass productions, at least for the stuff that I would do. But if you kind of process them in an interesting way, you can make some pretty cool, almost atonal sounding synth fills. And that's one way I get a lot of these as well, is I'll just go through those crazy patches, and then just try to break them pretty much. So yeah, it's an interesting way to get some stuff. And also, like, it's helpful to do that in a separate sound design session that's dedicated just to doing that, because when you're working on a song and you're trying to figure out like the arrangement and everything, and then you take, you know, an extra 30 minutes to the side or an hour to the side to just do that, it kind of breaks your flow with writing the song. So it's good to just have those in a folder, and you can just kind of pull them in. You have them labeled by key or BPM or whatever, right? And you just, while you're working, oh, I remember I've got this folder, I'll, you know, browse through and just plop them in. So that's usually what happens when I'm working on that kind of stuff. Bass is pretty straightforward. We've got, that's right, that little, like, I used to use Spire a ton for my mid and low mid basses, just because Spire has such a good sounding, like, aggressive saw sound, especially when you distort it. I don't know, it's like Silent with super saws. You can't really replicate it with any other plugin. Like, Silent just has a really good super saw sound. Spire has a really good, like, aggressive low mid saw sound, and you can't really replicate that. It's just a unique saw wave they have in there. This is kind of what's going on here. So this one isn't too crazy, but I do have, there's some pack, I think, yeah, it's this pack exactly. This pack has a ton of really cool sounds in it. Yeah, so a ton of cool stuff. And that's the only reason I use Spire, really, is that. I know it's good for leads as well, but I don't typically use it for leads. And then I think this is just mostly, don't really have max bass anymore. I don't use that anymore, but some sine waves pretty much. The ESW patch. It's kind of like a pseudo 808 type thing. So that's what's going on there. And then it kind of flows in and brings the chords in the B section of the drop. So these little cuts are kind of copied over for the most part. Actually, this is a separate cut, but the structure is pretty much the same, where like it'll cut in a similar area. I think actually it's a little different, so never mind. But the whole thing is in the B section, I bring in, this is where it sounds more future bassy. Bring in those super saws, and they're just a little wobbly. So it's like. So this is actually kind of an interesting super saw stack, because it's got, if I remember, it's got like a phaser thing on it that you don't normally hear. That I was absolutely obsessed with this sound for like a year, and I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. I never hear anyone do it, and I wanted to put it in everything I did, but it was like kind of abrasive sounding, so I didn't do it. I ended up not putting it in a lot of like my release music, but anyways. Oh yeah, Serenade. Yeah, for sure. Spire is definitely good for synthwave as well. I mean, it's a solid plugin. I just think, from what I've heard, it's just mostly really good at strong leads and those like aggressive basses. Yeah, here's a saw stack. So there's that one layer in there that I'm like, have always been so proud of this layer because I thought it was so cool. It's mostly a regular super saw, but pretty standard super saw, right? There's the interesting layer right there. Now, this is done in Serum. The processing on the left is, there's not much going on. There's a bit crusher and it's mostly EQ and compression. So nothing crazy. So the magic happens here, like the chord itself. So it says it's a patch. It started from a patch, but like the actual sound is something that I made. I think I just started from this patch because I liked how the bass sounded. Let's see. Let's see what the original sound sounded like. It's in the gray pack. Altadena. Where are you at? Did I miss it? Yeah, there it is. This is the original sound. So yeah, it's again pretty standard feature based stuff, right? But then you throw it here, and that's all that really is a phaser. And what I'm doing is I'm turning it down, and I'm sure you guys have seen this trick a million times. I actually have a preset saved in Serum called Cab Sim, but it basically turn the rate all the way down, depth all the way down, and you usually turn the feedback down as well. And you just kind of play with the frequency knob, and it kind of simulates a guitar cab sound almost. And you can tune it with the frequency knob. What I thought was cool is you take like an LFO like this and you kind of like step it. So it's like a stepping LFO, and then you control the frequency. You control the frequency, so it just kind of like will create different tones as it steps in and out of that frequency. That's all it's really doing. So it's super simple idea, but it just like gives this almost like vocal character to the saws that I thought was so cool and super fresh sounding, that I haven't really heard many other people do. Like I said, I used to do it a ton, but I ended up like replacing a lot of my saws I did it in, like for the final version of the songs, just because I thought it was too abrasive. But yeah, I was obsessed with that trick for a bit. Without it, and then with it. So, you know, it just makes it more interesting. And that's, I think that coupled with the lead in the A section of the drop is like the coolest part of the song. But oh, what's up, Vixen? Welcome, buddy. Tutorial for Need You. Yeah, I'm definitely down. The only thing so I've done Need You already. I can actually, or let me see if I can show you real quick. Oh crap. All right, we'll get over here. So that, I believe, is the breakdown for Need You. Feel free to come back and let me know if it isn't, but I'm pretty sure it is. The one I just put in the chat. If you want me to break down Need You even in more detail, let me know. I'll definitely do the live stream of that. I could definitely do that, so it's not a problem. But make sure to check that out first and get back to me if you want to see more. But yeah, back to this guy. And then there's just that little like saw lead that kind of fades in out of nowhere. 2 layers on this guy. Pretty basic saw lead there. I think the flanger's giving a lot of a tone, but I'm not sure. Not much actually. Yeah. This is I used to use this patch a lot, this cymatics patch, solo this. So that's what that's coming from. And then the layer, what does it sound like? Kind of feels like the low mids. And yeah, this is just something I made myself, I guess. Looks like. And I probably made it specifically just to fill out the bottom end of that lead. And then on to verse 2. Yeah, so Serenade, the reverb at the end is, I have to double check, but it looks like it says Valhalla, and then it's just automation on the mix knob, basically. Yeah, and then I'm doing that on both layers. It looks like this would be the automation on this dry wet. And that's a very common trick that I do on I would say pretty much every production I've like worked on is like I'll wash out a lead at the end of a drop or something like that, and I'm just washing out, it's like 9.99 times out of 10 it's a Valhalla vintage reverb, and I just automate the dry wet or the mix knob. And you can't forget the classic virtual ride impact. Those things are a meme now. So there's a couple like slightly interesting things happening here. I mean, you got this little pluck, which is the same as from the intro, but it's just more present now. I've opened the filter up a bit more. But there is, I think the chords are a little bit more different in this part. Oh, man. All right, I'm gonna restart this thing. So like this struggle back and forth, I used to have to deal with this like every project I worked on with Logic, and I cannot find a solution to it. The only thing I haven't done is completely uninstall Logic and reinstall it, just because I don't want to, honestly. But no, for sure, you're not an EDM producer if you don't have virtual riot samples in your project. You got to. The trick is you got to hide those Virtual Riot samples because everyone freaking knows them. I think actually the last project, the breakdown I did was what was it? Was it Met You? No, I can't remember which one it was, but oh, it was Dead of Night. Dead of Night, yeah. But I had Virtual Riot growls like in my fills, and I just layered them with something else, and no one even knew I had Virtual Riot growls in there. Gotta be thinking ahead. All right, now we listen to the chords. Kind of low passed, detuned saw chords with that warm thing from earlier. So the and I do this quite a bit as well still, but one little trick to kind of help you ease into new sections, especially if your chord progression isn't changing, which I talked about earlier, but one thing I like to do to kind of make a sharp distinction between, you know, a pre-chorus or a verse and a chorus or whatever, the build or the verse or break, or whatever you want to call it. One thing I'll do is I'll just change the chord progression up. And that works as well. But if you have the same chord progression, you want to keep the same chord progression to build into another section, you can do something as subtle as just like cutting the lows. So that's kind of what I did with these guys. I've got a filter on here, and I'm just kind of sweeping on this high pass filter here, and doing the same for this guy. And you'll see it as it builds out of that section. It's got a high resonance on it too. So there's a couple things. One, the chords that come in don't feel too weak, even though they are quieter, but now they don't feel overly weak because what was playing just before it didn't have as much energy because I swept some of it out. So that's one thing. And the other thing is it just helps indicate to the listener something new is about to happen. Just a little verse section. So I had that kind of like hip hoppy type break, not break beat, but almost hip hop type beat. Yeah, and then just threw in to kind of go with the hat pattern, that little like eighth note pattern I got going on there. Do this in there. And then that's just more or less doing triads of, I think doing triads of the chord progression. Pretty sure that's what that's doing. And then, oh, what's up, Jackie Tran? Welcome to the stream, buddy. So yeah, upcoming producers starting out. So for song releases, it depends. I mean, if you're really, really proud of a song, try to submit to labels. Actually, even early on, I would say try to find labels that you really like. And you can do that by looking at artists that you really like and then going to their Spotify. Actually, I'll show that real quick. This is one way you can find out which labels you want to release on and stuff. So say you want to check out, you know, I don't know, you want to check out me, right? And say Lipstick on a Champagne Flute, right? You're like, okay, I like that song. So then you go to the actual song and you go down and you can see the C and P line, which is the copyright, and I forgot what P is, some other version of copyright. I think it's the performance or something like that, or publishing side, but shows the label right there. So Bonfire Records. Now what you can do is Google Bonfire, and then you start looking for a Dropbox. A lot of like lower / mid-tier EDM labels will have Dropbox listed on their SoundCloud or on their website, or they'll be running through Label Radar. Yeah, so it's for publishing. Thanks, Serenade. So that's one way that I found out like which labels I wanted to push to and try to release on. And before I got my manager, it was literally just sending them stuff. And some, you know, they do listen to the track. Sometimes it'll take, you know, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever, but they do get through them from my experience. And so you just kind of be patient on that front. If you don't want to wait for that and you just want to get music out, you can go through something like CD Baby, TuneCore, what's the other one? DistroKid is another one. And those are just kind of ways for you to get your song onto Spotify and all that without having any kind of label backing you up. And what the label is really doing is they put a little bit of money into advertising and getting the song through their networks. So, you know, a label like Bonfire, for example, has playlists they've already set up. And those playlists have a certain amount of followers, so it's kind of like not guaranteed streams, but it helps kind of guarantee some exposure for your song right when it releases. So those are kind of the two routes for releasing. To gain exposure, honestly, like there's two things I think you got to do. One, you just got to make good music, and the only way to do that is just to keep making music. That's it. Like, you just gotta keep making a lot of music, and it just takes a while to get to a point where, like, okay, this is good and people are taking notice. So that's one thing. You gotta make music that people are gonna like, it's gonna catch people's ear and make them want to listen. The second thing you gotta do, because that's not enough anymore, the second thing you gotta do is you gotta tie that music to something. You gotta tie it to something that's like that people find entertaining. So it's like maybe you release a how-to video behind it, or like, you know, kind of do what I'm doing where you show like how you made this part of the song or whatever, right? If you're smaller, people may not be that interested. I mean, I'm still pretty small and I don't get hardly any traffic from this, but I'm still doing it. But another thing you can do is, you know, create like a visual for it and then put it on YouTube. Create something on TikTok, which is kind of the low effort thing, but also can yield high reward. And I think TikTok is a pretty good way to increase your exposure from an early stage. Yeah, telling a story through your releases definitely helps. I think so. I did that with my U EP, and like I put a lot of work into trying to tell a story through each song and through the visual art that was connected to that EP. And I think people really kind of gravitated to that more than a lot of the other singles that I've released. Even though they haven't streamed as well as some of my other singles, I've gotten a lot of community feedback. Like I'd say more so than a lot of the other songs that I've released that have even streamed better. So telling a story is definitely a big point. And part of telling that story is getting the audio figured out, having a good song that speaks to people. And to figure out whether or not a song speaks to people, I mean, does it speak to you? If you made it and you feel that it really kind of encompasses the emotion you're trying to put forth through that song, then it's going to speak to someone else as well. Simple as that. But another way to do that is to also tie a visual to it. And it doesn't have to be an animation. It could be just creative art or something that you do yourself or something that you commission from another artist. But yeah, there's basically, long story short, you should try, especially in today's day and age, you should try and tie something that isn't purely music to the music itself. So something visual, something interactive. People like to see a lot of FaceTime nowadays, so showing your face and kind of explaining why you made the song. Maybe you could do that in a TikTok video, stuff like that. All right, so that was a little aside. For sure, yeah. The story definitely doesn't need to be complex. I mean, case in point, like this, the thing that I did for UEP was very simple. It was really just about, it was a personal experience I went through where I, you know, it was about a person that I met and kind of the trajectory that our relationship took, essentially. It was a very simplified version of that trajectory, but it more or less kind of summed up an experience that I had that a lot of other people also have, and so they're able to connect with it as I tell it, if that makes sense. we doing here? All right. So chords aren't doing anything crazy, but we have this new element that comes in. This is a new counter melody. Right. I think it's like on a timer. I'm pretty sure it's on a timer. It's like every 10-15 minutes, it's just like, no, you've worked in Logic enough. It's time to quit. This program doesn't want me to win. This plugin, by the way, is amazing, but it's way too expensive, so that's why I haven't bought it yet. I need to uninstall it so I stop getting the activation alert every time I open Logic. But it's a very, very good mastering plugin. Oh, yeah. Coffee break every 15 minutes. I'd never get anything done. I do take my mandatory breaks, though. They're normally like every 90 minutes or so, though. That's why I drink so much water. It forces me to get up every so often. All right. So, let's actually get back into this. I don't know what that's coming from. Oh, it's probably this, maybe? There it is. Yeah. So I mean, that's just honestly something I was like, yo, it'd be kind of cool if there was a counter melody in here to kind of spice it up a bit. And the way you get to like knowing when to do those things is you just kind of listen to a lot of music, honestly. Like you just listen to a lot of other music and you start developing a taste. And my taste dictated that, hey, I want to hear something else here. Whereas someone else might have said, no, I don't want to hear that counter melody there. But like following your intuition on those types of things is what leads you to develop your style and your unique sense of like production within the whole community, or within EDM or any scene or whatever, right? So it's less contrived than like actually sitting down and thinking, all right, this is my bass sound, yada, yada, yada. You just kind of do what you think sounds cool. Since everyone's tastes are slightly different, you ultimately come up with a unique sound that way. So that's kind of my long-winded explanation as to why I did that counter melody there. It doesn't really appear anywhere else in the song. And for context, the vocals are here.
There's a necklace on my neck.
I don't remember. It's the same. Okay, so it's the same chords, I think, but it's a different melody. Bro, you gotta be kidding me. Oy. All right, we're trying to chug through it. We're gonna get through it, I'm sure. We got this. So same chord progression, but this pink section, this is all the new lead. And the reason why these are pink, I remember this very clearly, is I had no idea what to do for the second drop. Because I still don't do this very often, I still do this pretty much with every song. I'm not as strict about it as I used to be, but I used to be very strict about never having the same 2 drops and having each drop be its own unique moment. But then still having them, you know, tie together and live in the same song. So that always kind of put this extra stress on me for every song I made, but it also kind of helped me stand out a bit because I've had people specifically point that out about something that they like about my production, you know. So this purple section, the reason why I use a purple is because I went through probably 20 different lead designs or lead melodies and stuff until I was like, okay, this is the one, and I just color coded them basically. And I think I deleted the other ones because there's, you know, a couple different versions that I have of the song. But yeah, so this is where I introduced the new melody for drop 2, and what kind of helps tie this drop together with the first drop, chords are the same, so progression's the same, but new leads, and also an arp is introduced. So here's that. Just the leads on themselves, on their own. And then with the chords. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that is the same melody. No, it's slightly different. It's similar, but it's not the same. It's so close. It's like a very close cousin, but it's not quite in the same family. But it's just cool art here. This is probably one of my favorite things in the song. So that arp comes from this guy, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it doesn't come from that. Maybe it comes from this. There it is. Oh, wait, hold up. No, it doesn't. I don't know where it came from. It came from one of these. I think what I did is I probably Frankensteined it together by doing like a mix of different arps or something. I honestly don't know. Some of the times when I do my sound design is I literally will print things to audio and then just like keep iterating, and then I just delete the original patch. I don't even save it. Probably exactly what happened here. But the cool thing about this is, I mean, the art by itself is pretty cool. Just kind of bouncing back and forth, right? Got a little bit of delay in there as well. But I kind of have it washed out with reverb. It gets dry, and then it washes back out again, which I thought was kind of cool. And this little fill right before the drop, or right in the downbeat of the drop, is same art, different sound design. I think different, or probably similar sound design, but different processing on it. So that's what's going on there. And then you got the drop, which is a lot of different layers. Some of them are actual layers. Yeah, like these two guys layer up, this layers in with that, and that comes in. It's a mess, honestly. Like, I wouldn't run my projects like this anymore, but that's how I did it for this one. So the way it's making this sound, is this, I don't know if it's a whole new, no. So I'm actually using a lot of the same sound design as the original drop. So that's another thing. It's same, different melody, but same chord progression, also same sound design. That's what ties the drops together. So So yeah, I won't go into that since I already did that. But one thing I am doing that's kind of interesting is you see these little gray bars. I'm doing a little pitch bending, and that's what's giving it some more interest. So yeah, I'm just kind of bending into notes, bending out of notes. So this bends down out of that note and then in or up into the next note. The other thing that's kind of cool is like this whole lead sequence is very bouncy just on its own, and that's done with tonalities. It's basically like playing with space, like a sense of space, and you can kind of make something bouncy just with a sense of space, right? Like or different tonalities. So you got this first, and I'll show that real quick. So you got this first lead, right? And then you have this little thing that kind of juts in right after it. So like that little, it's a slightly different tonality to it. It's more washed out, pushed further in the back. So you get something that's right up front, kind of, you know, plucking dun, 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 and then on this upbeat, you got something in the back, and it kind of forces your ears to listen a bit more, and it basically pushes you in and out of the mix a bit, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know if that makes any sense, but just playing with tonalities and a sense of space to kind of give bounce to the lead without having any percussion. So before you even put the percussion in, you've already got bounce. Like if I were to do the same exact melody, but then in this part right here, right, instead of having that little section or that little lead, what did just happen? There we go. Play there. I just put it in this one. Right? If I did that, it doesn't bounce. But if I do it here, it kind of has a little bit of a tail to it, but it kind of like, I don't know, it just feels bouncier. It's hard to explain it really, but the main way you get that is just playing with different tonalities and things that sound similar, but like are a little bit more washed out. Or a little bit more low pass, or have a little bit more distortion on it, or whatever, and just juxtaposing those so they kind of play back and forth. And that's basically what this whole lead section is doing. Like it's just bouncing back and forth between different tonal sounds and lead designs, and just to give it flow pretty much, because I could easily have just done that entire melody, everything that's happening here, just in this one patch, and it would still work. It just wouldn't be as bouncy. So I won't go to this because this little B section here is a chord change. I'll get at that into a little bit, but the saw stack is pretty, it's the same as before, but I introduced, to kind of give a sense of progression, I introduced that vocally sounding layer in the saw patch and the saw stack in the second 8 bars of the drop. Let the lead shine a bit right here. So like the thing is you've got this really bouncy melody, you give it time to shine in the first 8 bars of the drop, and then you could just repeat it for the second 8 bars of the drop and just throw in like a hi-hat loop or something. But what I decided to do was to up the energy level even more by throwing in that vocal layer for the saw stack, and that's what kind of ties things together even more and hypes it up a bit more. Like without it, hella noisy, it's hella messy in there, but it does make a difference. Like I said, I'm not very proud of this mix, but that extra vocal layer in the synth helps really kind of push it a bit more and up the energy. And thanks. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I still have a hard time sometimes writing like really bouncy melodies, but my fallback is really just what I said, like experimenting with different tonalities. It doesn't have to be, and you actually don't want it to be like super contrasting lead sounds. Typically especially I've seen guys like Company do this as well, is they'll take the patch that they're working on, like their main lead sound, they'll render to audio and then just do slightly different processing, or like soak it in reverb for like a throw or something like that. But then they'll have different tracks for that, and they'll just cut in and out throughout the course of the melody. And a little goes a long way. Like, you really don't have to do a whole lot to start adding some balance and dynamic nature to the whole melody. So yeah, definitely experiment with that some. And this is where it gets all big brained. I don't want to call it big brain, but it's just like, I used to be really all about this too. I don't really do this as much anymore, but so like you have the chord progression for this drop is the same as the chord progression for this drop, right? Which is that higher tempo chord progression that picks up in the build. But in the last section of this drop, this is now a 24 bar drop instead of a 16 bar drop. So I added an extra 8 bars. And in this last 8 bars, it's almost like a bridge. You could think of it like in a pop song, or like a post drop almost, or a post chorus, I guess you'd say. But the chord progression changes. And then it goes into, I believe that's the chord progression from the intro. No, it's not. I think I have like 4 or 5 different chord progressions in this song, and I didn't need to. I just did it because I was like, it sounds cool. I don't normally do that. Normally I keep it to 2, 3 max different chord progressions. But yeah. I like, my mentality going into this last 8 bars of the drop was I want it to sound like a post chorus, like something that's kind of easing you out of the drop but still feels like it's part of the drop, if that makes sense. And so one way to kind of signal that is melodically through just changing the progression by having the same, but still having like the same design and everything, right? And then, of course, you can't forget like throwing these up an octave, because it's just an easy thing to do and it always hypes it up a bit more. And then also introducing that arp in the build, or I think it was arp in the build. Yeah, it kind of is. Hold on. I wanted just the arps. So this guy. And it's also got some like phaser vocally sounding thing on it. Yeah, I did it in Serum. I guess I did it with this guy in Serum. Yeah, it looks like triads that I'm just like running through an arp, and this is the arp that Logic has, so I'm probably just running through that. And it's just stepping up at 30 seconds. Yep, they're stepping down, so it's going down through it in 2 different octaves. So that's what's going on there. And then the patch itself is very simple. Yeah, nothing crazy. I think the phaser sound's coming from this guy right here, but I bounced it to audio. So what's going on there? No, yeah, I definitely, so the problem I have is I overcomplicate shit all the freaking time. Like, one thing probably the biggest thing I've learned over the past year, maybe 2 years, is how to simplify my productions, so that it's not like, so that it's more digestible. I think this is digestible, but it's like digestible to people who appreciate slightly more technical music. I think to a broader audience, they're just like, all right, it's too much going on. So I'm trying to like still keep some of that complexity, but just hide it in more clever ways. Instead of being so overt, like, oh, I can have 4 different chord progressions in my song. Like, there's no really need to do that. But sometimes it calls for it, but you know. one chord progression is really all you need. It's about how you change that progression around in terms of like how it sounds and how it leads into other things and like all that kind of stuff. Oh, so Chacky, yeah, so vocal processing, that is a good point. I can show you. So on this song, I'm hardly doing anything on the vocal processing. It's really just compression and a very slight amount of EQ. What I will do, I want to do a separate video that's dedicated just to vocal processing, because I actually go pretty deep on it when I need to. But for this one, like the vocal stem I got for the remix already sounded pretty good on its own. I just needed to beef it up a bit so that it would work in an EDM instrumental, because this original song was like more of an R&B type song, so the vocal didn't need to be super compressed. But basically all I did, I got a little bit of de-essing, some EQs to start it off, but I mean all I'm doing is just cutting up at 133, which is pretty high, but it works for EDM. Some de-essing at what, 10 to 12k, hitting the upper end of the S region, and then a 2A, LA 2A. I usually use the UAD one. It's just the one I have. And I don't know how many dBs am I doing.
And it's got me
Pushing it decent amount. So like with the 2A, you can push it pretty heavy. I mean, sometimes you'll see people push like to the 10, maybe even 20 dBs of gain reduction. I'm only pushing 5 to 7 here. And then Pro MB just to contain the low mids a bit.
got me kind of thinking this is something we can add on to.
So it's very subtle, and really the only reason I put that there was there are parts where he gets really into his vocal, and at those parts the low mids kind of, it's almost like a proximity effect where they start to kind of overtake the vocal. So yeah, that's the whole point of that multi-band there. RVox just to kind of smooth everything out again. It's similar to the 2A. I think it's actually an opto style compressor, I'm not sure, but that's what the RVox is doing, and also just gives it a little bit more loudness. And then this is just a reverb throw. This is actually not working, it's not on for most of the song. And then I automate the dry wet here, and I just, yeah, do a little reverb throw at the end of the song or end of phrases. That's all that's going on for the vocals for this song. Like there's not hardly anything. Now for things like Dead of Night and some of my other originals, I do all the vocal processing myself from like raw vocals for the most part. And I can show what's going on with those in a separate video. But I do think I need to do a whole video dedicated to that, or a whole stream maybe dedicated to that, just because they are it's pretty intensive doing a full vocal mix and production. I usually treat it as like a separate part of the whole song. But yeah, we'll do that in a separate video. Vocal out. And then I've got a little bit of that. So the whole theme of this song is that like bouncy kind of thing, right? You can hear it. It's in the chords. I don't know about this. All right, well, 1 second. We'll reload the project. We're almost there. See the light. Light is at the end of the tunnel. Also, real quick, do you guys prefer YouTube or Twitch? I think I'm preferring YouTube a bit. I'm interested to see. I think in general, people seem to be moving more to the YouTube platform for live streaming. It's just easier for a lot of reasons, but because Twitch only has live streaming, it's not really set up as like a high quality video platform, which I kind of want to do some of those as well, but it'd be nice to have it all on one platform. So all right. right, we back. So like I was saying, that vocal layer for the saw stack kind of carries through. And it just filters out with the rest of it. These are this vocal synth thing. This is the vocoder. It's just muted right now, but this beautiful synth patch. I love this guy. Sounds really nice. Kind of synth wavy. So yeah, it's like same kind of trick that I was doing with that ARP is like you introduce it, you filter it down kind of halfway through the progression, and you filter it back up, so it's like filters closing out, and it could just kind of close out to like a subtle ending, but instead I decided to open it back up towards the end. Yeah, towards the end of the progression, it kind of like washes out, so it washes out on like a more open sound instead of a closed muffled sound, if that makes sense. So Serenade, Pro MB over Pro Q on the vocals. Okay, yeah. So the reason for that, and I can get way more in depth on this when I do like the actual vocal processing video, but for this one, Pro MB for this. So with Pro Q, if you go Pro Q3, they do have dynamic EQ. When I did this song, I didn't have Pro Q3. I only had Pro Q2. So with Pro Q2, there was no dynamic EQ. So if I were to just knock down the low mids here, it would be a constant, you know, band cut basically. Where like his vocal, and I mentioned it earlier, the low mids of his vocal are really only a problem in certain sections of the vocal. Now there's two ways you can handle that. One is you can it's kind of a version of clip gaining, where you just go in and like say this is where his vocal gets a little heavy, right? I go through, I chop it, and then I can come through and just like clip gain it down to kind of level that vocal out. Or I can chop that, move it to a separate track, and then create an EQ that only affects that vocal or that syllable or word or whatever of the vocal, where he gets a little too, you know, low mid heavy. So that's like the more precise surgical way of doing it. The way that I typically like to do it, I'll do the clip gaining technique for de-essing if I'm like cleaning up a raw vocal. But the way I typically like to do it with more finished sounding vocals is, because it sounds a little more natural to me, is to do a multi-band compressor. And the reason why is because if you set the settings correctly, the compressor itself reacts a little bit more musically than just a static EQ, meaning that since it's a dynamic control, it's kind of reacting to how his vocal, you know, triggers the compressor. The other thing it does, it's kind of like an automatic vocal writer for the low mids, or frequency dependent vocal writer, right? So if like the low mids pop out here and there, I just throw a compressor just on that band, and then I set the settings accordingly, and it'll pop out when it needs to.
And it's got me kind of thinking this is something we can add on to.
So you can see how he kind of like how it'll react to his different when he says different words, he has more bass in his voice or stuff like that. The other thing here is you typically would see this type of processing on a vocal that has bad proximity effect. This doesn't really, but there's a little bit of movement from the mic you can hear where he's kind of louder in certain sections than others. Part of that is mic technique. The other part is the engineer not cleaning the vocals properly when they're doing the processing. When I do my own vocal processing for like vocalists and stuff, I spend a good hour to 2 hours just cleaning the files. And I'll talk about what cleaning audio files and all that means in like a separate video, because it can get pretty detailed. But I think spending a good amount of time on doing that really saves you a lot of headache in the future when you're mixing vocals and getting them to fit into an instrumental. So kind of a long-winded answer, but that's why the Pro MB over the Pro Q. Even with the Pro Q3, so even if I had the Pro Q3, even though it's the dynamic EQ, the thing that kind of after comping, yeah, so comping is just performance taking, right? Like that's just how you like nail down your performance. Cleaning audio files, so like the typical process for getting all your vocals right is you would track. While you track, you have multiple takes, you comp those takes to get a solid performance. Essentially, once you're happy with the performance, then you clean the files. This is where you clean out breaths, you clean out, and some of this is done in the comping as well, but you clean out your breaths, clicks, pops, do a little bit of de-essing. You can clip gain S's and maybe plosions and stuff like that. And then you also will do some of what I was talking about, where it's like instead of throwing a compressor to level the vocal, you might just clip gain to level the vocal, which is a better way of doing it. Before compression, before you even mix the vocal. So yeah, a lot of people don't realize that, like, you realize it, like, because I used to do a bunch of vocal mixing for people. I don't do it as much anymore just because it takes time and I would rather spend my time doing something else, to be honest. But yeah, there's a lot of work in cleaning vocal files, like vocal files for mixing. But as I was saying, for the Pro Q3, even though it's dynamic EQ, it doesn't operate the same as the Pro MB. And the reason why is with a Pro MB or a multiband compressor, you have attack and release controls. And that's going to be pretty important for a vocal. For some other instruments and something, so something like guitar, depending on how the guitar is played, doesn't make as much of a difference. You can kind of get away with just using a Q3, but with the vocal, I would say, especially, it kind of is situationally dependent, but I would typically reach for an MB over a Pro Q3. I still use the Q3, but just not for those type of moves. I would use an MB for that type of move. Yeah, I think the outro's pretty simple. I mean, it's just the, so like I said before, it's that chord, that vocally chord layer, that chord kind of layer from before, some bells, which are just playing the same chords, it sounds like. Yeah. This guy. And then arp that just washes out. Bell pluck from same thing from earlier. And the lead sound is just kind of being slowly filtered out as well. It's that panning left and right one. And this guy kind of filters in. And I used to do this in like every freaking song I worked on, is I would change the chord progression in the outro and I would do some crazy, not crazy, but just like sad, like almost resolute, but definitely more emotional sounding progression. And I'd always put a bell sound in there, and usually the last couple chords I would trill. I guess trill would be the word, but kind of like trill the voices of the chord. So it's like that. And I always thought that was so cool, in fact, that I did it like every song I did. And I kind of tired of doing that, but it is kind of cool. I do kind of like doing that. Just kind of makes it sound nice and pretty at the end, right? All right, well, Logic doesn't want to play anymore, and I think that's pretty much everything I have to show with the song, unless you guys want to see anything else. Is there anything else that you want me to cover for this one? I didn't really go into the drums, but the drums are very simple in this song. You know, the drop is like hat layer and like a clav and some weird kind of percussive click thing. Very simple. There's a couple like tom fills, but that's it. There's nothing spectacular. Even the processing on these guys, like, let's see, what does the processing look like? Yes, gotta love the trills. I know there's 2 kick layers. I'm pretty sure it's that. Yeah, so it's like a virtual riot kick that I'm using as the top end of it for the main kick, and then I'm layering it with this like woofy hell, super woofy crane kick. Yeah. So I layered the kick. Kick's layered in the drop. I believe the snare's layered as well. Let's see real quick. It is. No, it's not that one. I play it, but I don't think it's gonna play because I think my Logic just shit out on me again. Yeah, it did. But it'll give me the thing. There it is. So it's this. So it's these 2 that are layered for the snare. So this is. Did I really just kind of stick them together like that? I did. I just pushed them together. Well, I guess it works, right? It's not a spectacular sound. I'm not really very proud of this kick and snare. I think my kick and snares that I do now are much tighter and much punchier, but yeah. You live and you learn, right? So that's pretty much it for the kick snare here. I like when I do my drum processing now or drum programming, I actually don't do much layering. I probably will layer the snares if I need something to sound a bit more unique, or I can't find a snare layer that's like satisfying, you know, like this giving me the sound I want. But for my kicks, I'm almost never layering. Like I may cut the click or the transient off of one kick and put it with, you know, the body of another kick, but I wouldn't really call that layering because I kind of just cut them and then fade them into each other and then create a new kick. It's still a single sound that plays out. It's not like, you know, 2 kick layers playing together. So I wouldn't really say I layer kicks anymore. Like this is kind of doing the same thing, but I'm not just keeping the transient here. Like I'm essentially filtering it so that the mids of the whole kick are out, or like the low mids are all cut out, but it's still playing the full sample. Like it's playing the transient, the body, and the tail of the sample, but it's just high passed. And this is doing the same thing, but it's just, you know, low passed. Whereas now I would do just the transient, like time wise, not do any EQing, because normally the transient of a kick is just high end anyways, and then you just fade that in. And Ableton's a lot better with that because the waveforms in Ableton are just so much easier to read. Logic's waveforms aren't terrible, like especially when you zoom in you can start to see things, but like it's just not as friendly as the Ableton waveforms. So when I got to Ableton, I was like, yep, that's how I'm doing things now. So but snares, like I said, I'll still layer those to get different like tonalities and stuff. But I try not to. I think the simpler your snare and kick sounds are, the punchier and more impactful they'll be. You can mix them louder. You can do more distortion on them without them sounding blown out. Like you can do all sorts of things. And then the rest of the percussion is just like, you know, random samples. It's not anything spectacular. There's a lot of bass layers in here actually. Hold on. I think I might real quick check those. As a final little check. Unless there's anything else in particular you want to see, Serenade. Oh man. I am stoked for some of the music I'm working on now, though. I'm excited for you guys to hear it because it is friggin' dope. I feel like it puts to shame anything I've released so far. I'm really excited about it. All right, let's check these base layers out. Yeah, so the Remember VIP is in like 8 days, I think. No. It's like this, I think it's this Friday actually. Or Wednesday. Maybe it's tomorrow. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Let me check real quick. I think Joaquin might have told me. Oh yeah, I'm actually thinking about opening like or doing a little like off the cuff session or stream where I just kind of open up current projects and just go through them, even ones that aren't completely finished. Just cause like why the fuck not? And just see who shows up. I'm not gonna save the video either. It'll just be a live stream and people who show up get to see and people who don't, maybe next time. But I think it'll be pretty cool. You guys will get a little sneak peek of some of the stuff I've been working on. Also, I'll be post some work in progress stuff to the Discord as well, for sure. I'm gonna probably do that pretty soon. Yeah, I don't know when that VIP drops. I know it's very soon. It's like this Wednesday or next Wednesday. So it's either I'm pretty sure it's next Wednesday. I don't think it's right now. Actually, it's on my phone's up there. Okay. Oh, there's only 2 base layers. There's not 3 or 4. Yeah. It's the same layers I was talking about before. I don't know why. Oh, because I unhid them. Yeah. So there's nothing crazy in the bass. Same exact thing as the other drop or throughout the whole song. Cool. So yeah, that's it. There's some effects stuff, but that's all very standard run of the mill. Some texture layers, like 2 texture layers. My songs now have like 5 or 6 of these. Some white noise, impact sounds, a riser. Yeah. That's it. All right, I think I'm gonna probably call it there unless you got any more questions, Serenade, or you just want to chill. I don't care. Maybe I'll just open up a project right now. Yeah, sure, we'll save it. Let's see. I have. I can't open any of that. So in that song, no, I didn't. In lips, so I do now. Yes. I kind of bounce back and forth on that. Like on really old projects, I would hold on real quick. I want to figure out what I want to do. I don't know which one I want to open. Yeah, so it depends. So yeah, I bounce back and forth between that. I used to use a lot of white noise to fill stuff out. That project was primarily high frequencies of the leads, or just filling it out. If I had to go back and remix it, I would do it more with white noise and low pass the leads, because I think it's a cleaner sound. But that's basically what I'm doing now. A lot of my leads and saws are actually cut. Like the projects I'm working on right now, I low pass them at like 7 or 8K, and then I fill out the top end with white noise and then the cymbals, and it leads to a much cleaner mix down. And that's kind of what I've been working with. What? Maybe I'll open this. I'm gonna go through a little project real quick in like 5 minutes or for 5 minutes. This is I mean, obviously this is still work in progress, but still not sure what I want to do with it. This is one of like, I don't know, probably 10 or 15 songs I have that I'm just like trying to figure out what to do with. But check it out real quick. Actually, hold up. I'm gonna do something real quick. I'm gonna end the stream. Yeah, I think that's what I'm gonna do. So before I play it, I think I'm gonna end the stream. And then, oh, did I just delete that? Oh, that fucking sucks. I think I'm gonna end the stream first. That way I can like control that. Yeah. Yeah, all right. I'll be right back. I'm gonna restart the stream. Peace.